we heard Psalm 100 from the 16th century King James Version. So I wonder which one sounded better to your ears. So the first version made me feel more, well, included. Not only do I relate to the more gender-neutral language, but I also love those metaphors and the beautiful, inclusive language that Peterson uses. Don't you love the idea of making yourself at home with God? Doesn't that warm your heart? And yet, if I'm really being honest, and this is probably a good time to be honest, I must admit when I hear the words, enter into his courts with thanksgiving and enter into his courts with thanksgiving and his courts with praise, it ties me back to so many good memories. Well, bless my little Southern Baptist heart, right? I mean, I love the psalm. We read it at Thanksgiving at the table, and it's inspired millions of church choirs over the centuries. However, do notice the imbalance of the masculine without the feminine. And let us always remember that what we say and how we say it really does matter. Make a joyful noise. How can we do that in this crazy world? There's so much sarcasm and tweeting and social media teaching us to condense our thoughts to 141 characters. How do we make a joyful noise together? And really, do we want to anymore? You must be asking yourselves, Pastor Laura, how can you possibly talk about joy at a time like this? There's so many brokenhearted people in our world. In our sanctuary today, there's despair and conflict and so many, many things that make us deeply, deeply sad, like the children and the families on our borders. But my friends, if we don't talk about joy, who is? If we don't know how to do it, then how can we expect anyone else to do it? It's up to us to stem the tide, to shift from sarcasm to authenticity, to stop pointing out the negative and lift up hope. It is time, my friends, to truly make a joyful noise everywhere we go, because the news out there is already full of pain and despair. We need to offer this balance, to share more about the promise of God's unconditional love and the good news of our inclusive gospel message, and less about what we see as wrong in our world. Now, I'm not just saying that we skip around town, scattering glitter and riding our unicorns, although some days that's a very good idea. I am saying that we need to be in action around all that troubles us, be agents for social change, and bring joy to every person we encounter. So let's examine this for a minute. Peterson's paraphrase of the psalm includes these words: sing yourselves into God's presence. Don't you love that idea? I mean, there's so many ways to do it. We can hum to ourselves. We can sing a lullaby to a fussy baby. You can shout a camp song with our youth. Welcome home. We can sing beautiful hymns that lift our hearts, our neighbors' hearts, and hopefully all ye lands. It also means we can sing our way to justice and equality and inclusivity. We can sing as we serve meals to the homeless. We can share a tune with a sad friend. Have you ever hummed a familiar hymn with someone struggling with Alzheimer's? Oftentimes they pick the tune up with you, right? We can participate in a protest with chants or with music. Singing joyfully doesn't mean that we accept things as they are. Singing joyfully does mean that we can join our voices together for important causes, as well as for the purpose of lifting the hearts of those without hope. So what song can we sing together today? Our young people certainly had a few suggestions. There's many songs that come to mind when I think about singing my way into God's presence. But the hymn we sang at the beginning, thank you, Anna, Joyful, Joyful. It's number 4 in our New Century Hymnal. I don't know why 1, 2, and 3 got ahead of it, but it's number 4. It's at the very beginning. And I know you know this. The tune is from the fourth movement of Beethoven's famous Ninth Symphony, and it's called Ode to Joy. Joyful, joyful, we adore you. You know it, right? It's familiar. Now, some of you can remember way back in the 1990s when Whoopi Goldberg made this song famous in her movie Sister Act 2. Good for you, Josh. I'm glad you know that. I was like, how old am I? In one of the final scenes, the students in her choir bring this song to life with all kinds of new rhythms, some rap lyrics, dance movements. Do check it out on YouTube. It will totally lift your hearts. One of the rappers asked this question over and over. Are you down with G-O-D? I said, are you down with G-O-D? Well, are we down? The answer is yes. Okay. Whoopi, I'm not the best rapper, I know. Whoopi's choir just brings the house down with their interpretation of this old hymn because they fill it with new joy. Now, you can also find a beautiful rendition of this hymn sung by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And as you might expect, it's a very different musical experience and context. And we just sang it in our very special United Christian Church way at the beginning of our service. So how can the same song sound so different? How can these words of this beautiful psalm still move us many thousands of years later? Because it's filled with joy. It has unadulterated passion in it. Because it's what we want for ourselves, the children in our homes and at our beleaguered borders. We want a joyful noise everywhere we go. So we pray for it and we sing about it and we continue to seek it every morning in our prayers. Every morning. It will inspire us to come together after worship today and talk about solutions and ways that we can engage and speak out about the injustice at our borders. There's so much power in music and in the words that we choose to use. And as we move through our days communicating with each other, total strangers, the people at work or at school, on our various social media accounts, yes, even on Snapchat. Please, dear God, help us make a joyful noise there. But just pause for a moment and think about all the words you've already said just coming into church today. At least one of you said that you were glad to see me. Thank you. What if the words that came out of our mouth were words of encouragement or gratitude or joy? What if we all worked really, really hard to notice the way we choose to communicate with the humans in our lives and made it more life-giving, more affirming, more joyful? I think we can do it. The Buddhists have a precept called right speech. Some of you may be familiar with it. New York Times best-selling author Jack Kornfield is my favorite Buddhist teacher, and he introduced this concept to me. And here is a quote from the Buddhist Suttas about right speech, right intention, and right action. As long as a society holds regular and frequent assemblies, meeting in harmony and mutual respect, can they be expected to prosper and not decline. As long as a society follows the long-held traditions of wisdom and honors its elders, can they be expected to prosper and not decline. As long as a society protects the wives and daughters and vulnerable among them, can they be expected to prosper and not decline. As long as a society cares for the shrines and sacred spaces of the natural world, can they be expected to prosper and not decline. Now, Kornfield goes on to explain this sutta just a little bit further, and I quote, "The path to human happiness and liberation requires right intention. Intentions that are free from greed and hatred and cruelty, right speech, speech that is true and helpful, not harsh or vain or slanderous or abusive, and right action. Actions that are free from causing harm, killing, stealing, and sexual exploitation. End quote. So I think we should start a right speech movement here today in our church. What a wonderful goal that would be. We can start with our families and the rest of the world, and we can hold regular and frequent assemblies to meet in harmony with one another. Harmony in our committee meetings, harmony in our faith formation classes, harmony in our church council. As I watched the political debates for the 2020 election this past week, I found myself wondering this: who is doing the listening? I mean, so many people were talking. Who is listening? Now, some of you are probably saying, thank you for sharing what the Buddha teaches, but what does the Bible say about right speech? Thank you for asking. I'm going to start with the 10 Commandments, move on to the Psalms, and then the Sermon on the Mount, and we'll be out of here by 1, I promise. From Exodus 20, commandment number 3, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. King James Version. Now, not only are we charged with being careful about our language around God, but also everything that God has created. So that includes the earth and all of God's creatures and one another. We must speak with kindness and gentleness about all of our earth. Commandment number 10 is pretty clear. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Don't lie. Okay, that's pretty clear. But how about number 6? Thou shalt not kill. Most of us have not killed anyone lately. But what about when we assassinate someone's character by gossiping behind their back? Isn't that a way to kill someone? Or perhaps by just ignoring them and turning our head and acting as if they don't matter. My friends, this is also a way to kill someone. And then we move into the Psalms. From Psalm 15, speak the truth from your hearts. Or Psalm 34, keep your tongue from evil. And there is this, I have set my heart on your laws, from Psalm 119. We're invited, reminded, encouraged to always speak the truth with love from a place of compassion and understanding. Finally, in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says this: whoever practices and teaches these commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I want us to be great again, don't you? Isn't that a goal? Greatness? And also in this sermon, Jesus says, settle matters quickly with your adversary. Now, this is where we're not supposed to go to bed angry, or upset, or having said something we regret and we haven't apologized for it. This is where we remember we are responsible for making things right. Because words matter. The key to this path of a joyful coexistence is to listen more, to speak kind words, and to apologize when we are wrong. And isn't that what we want for ourselves and our loved ones and the community where we live and our church? It sounds easy enough, but every single one of us fails at this every single day. Every single day. American journalist and author Krista Tippett, at a recent commencement speech at the Naropa Institute in Boulder, says this about joy. Joy is not a luxury. It is not a privilege. It is a resilience-giving, life-giving birthright. And we cannot call forth in the world something we don't believe in or embody. So my friends, joy is not a luxury. It's a life-giving birthright we owe ourselves and each other, which is why we're invited to come to church each week for a checkup, to connect spiritually, to receive and review the Word of God, and to sing. Joy is not a privilege, which is why we're reminded to pause when agitated, to count to 10 before we speak, to not hit that send button on that angry email until we've calmed down, spoken with a trusted colleague, or maybe even prayed. Let us all try to send joy into our world, not more pain. Joy gives us resilience. which is why all of us, every single one of us, comes here to sing joyful, joyful, and to hear this psalm that we have heard 1,000,000 times, and to pray together because we can. Because we want a better life for ourselves, our children, those on our borders, and our world. Because in the end, we all want our lives to be an ode to joy and not an ode to sorrow. May it be so. Amen.